Hi, Samson.
Hi, Barbara. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
Managing. Just finished a move yesterday, so in a completely new place, hence all the bare white walls behind me.
Well, I certainly appreciate you sitting down with me, considering that you just moved yesterday.
Of course, Wi-Fi's up and running and good to go. So,
You know, you have such an indomitable spirit. You have worked on multiple shows here. Aunt Rainey, um, two shows by Joshua Harmon, Bad Jews and Significant Other. You did the Magic Dreidels. You did the world premiere of We Are the Levinsons. So I have seen you and spoken with you probably hundreds of days between production meetings, rehearsals, performances. There has never been a day that you didn't have a smile on your face.
I'm sure there has been a day or two, but I try to whenever I see myself, in a moment where it's just the frustrations getting to me, I just take a moment to kind of sit back and try to remember why I'm doing this. And, that normally does the trick. So, yeah.
Well, you do a lot of things as a stage manager.
Yeah. Yeah. Depending on the house there's a lot that kind of goes into that too. So, but that's to me what makes it so much fun is the not necessarily the juggling of everything, but the figuring out what needs to be done in problem solving of it. It's kind of like a really big logic puzzle, and I'm a nerd who loves those type of things. So I get a kick out of every bit of it.
And it does vary depending on the theater company. But, our audiences, I think, have heard the words stage manager, but I don't know how much they know about all of the details and pieces of the puzzle that you manage. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Speaking specifically to Minnesota Jewish Theater, stage managing, there are times that my process sometimes has started as early as the audition process and being there to kind of help, you know, check people in, make sure that they're all set, and then go from there. Then leading up to a production, normally at least a couple weeks before the first rehearsal, sometimes even, much further back, we'll start with production meetings. So as a stage manager, it's, my job to be there and run that, take all the notes, make sure anyone who's not there gets all the information and we get all the information from them. And then once the rehearsal process starts, stage manager's job is to get into the space, make sure the room's set up for rehearsal,
Make sure the alarm doesn't go off in the rehearsal
make
space.
sure the alarm doesn't go off in the rehearsal space, make sure you don't forget the key at home and have to drive back. um, get all that set up so that way, when rehearsal starts at 6, rehearsal can actually start at 6, and it's not 45 minutes of let's all sit down and say hello. And we want to be friendly, and every single crew that I've worked with, we've all gotten along so great, but you got to make sure that you're utilizing that time to really work on the project. So normally I try to show up anywhere from 30 minutes to 45 minutes early, depending on where the location is and what setup is required, if possible. And then taking down any possible notes, making sure you're keeping track of what the breaks are. I know it sounds like such a small thing, but especially for working with anyone equity, but we actually kind of treat everyone who comes in with that same type of expectation set through equity as far as breaks and everything goes. And then when we shut down rehearsal, got to clean it all up and put it back, whatever space we're renting for rehearsals, and type up a report, send it to all the production staff. And that's typically one day, but that's a rinse repeat and goes through as, the rehearsal process. Then tech week, the week before we actually do our show, when we get into the space is where I pretty much substitute sleeping with just running around, doing as much as I can, because there's everything from I guess this isn't necessarily a job set for a stage manager, but it's something that I really much enjoy, is being a part of the whole process. So I'll typically go in early and help with you know, the setup of the stage if we need to. I want to make sure that it's prepped for the actors. The most recent show that we did, Significant Other, there's so many parts that went into the moving of the set, or how movable the set was on stage by the actors. And a lot of that work that our TD Dieter was doing he was having to do a new thing for us every day. So I was always kind of going in and checking to make sure everything worked. During Tech Week, yeah. So the actor's first time on stage, and then the next day would be completely different. And again, there's only so much time that you have, so you want to make sure you utilize that time. So I would go.
And then
early.
when the show goes up or is opening, you are running lights, you're running sound, you're setting props. Yeah. And I know both of Joshua Harmon's pieces had lots of little idiosyncratic props, like specific food and where the snacks had to be and what the snacks had to be and where they lived.
Different glasses for Significant Other, because there was such a time period and different locations. I think it was something like, I think it was 30 different glasses that I had to prep and wash for each show to make sure that was all ready. So yeah, and you know, get there early, make sure the actors can get in and all the situations prepped for them. And yeah, really from that first, from the very beginning until the very end of the production, the stage manager's there to make sure that everything goes swimmingly and that everyone kind of has someone that they can reach out to if they need help with anything.
In addition to being a stage manager, I know you have been an actor and a writer. So, but I've never seen you act. Tell me a little bit about all that background.
Yeah, very few people have seen me act, at least recently. My background actually, I went to Normandale Community College for theater. I got my AFA in theater performance there. I eventually went on and did my bachelor's in psychology. But while there at Normandale, I actually got a job in the tutoring center and stayed on an extra year after finishing all my classwork. So I took some extra classes just for fun, and one of the classes happened to be stage management. And I loved it. It was fun, and it was, you know, kind of played to my strengths. So I gave it a shot and went out and interned with Walking Shadow for a show, and it was great. And then I didn't do anything else with theater while I was getting my bachelor's for probably another, I don't know, probably like 3 years. And then Walking Shadow reached out to me and asked me to do a show of theirs, despite me had only been an intern as an assistant once. And after doing that show, I got recommended to doing one with Theater Unbound, which is where I met Shelley Place, who ended up putting me in contact with you. So my first show with you, Bad Jews, was actually only my third time stage managing. I was still pretty early on when I got started with Minnesota Jewish Theater. One of the main reasons I always like going back to you guys, kind of one of my early starts. But as far as acting goes, I do enjoy it. I don't enjoy the prep work, you know, the auditioning, the preparing of all that. I know no actor really does, but I also really respect. If I'm not willing to put in the work, then I don't think it's worth wasting someone's time with that. As opposed to stage management, that prep work, the organizing and getting everything together is something that I find a lot more energy from.
Sure.
As far as writing goes, I actually direct up at a high school, Elk River High School in Minnesota. I direct their one act play and their fall play. And every year I write their one act for the students. I want it to be kind of customized straight for the students. So I really enjoy that. I think directing is where my future passions really lie. But I love all of it. I don't think there's a side of theater that I've worked on that I've walked away from and said never again. I haven't really tried costuming. That might do that for me, but everything else I've really much enjoyed so far.
You are originally from Manchester, New Hampshire. How did you land in Minnesota?
A very roundabout way. I moved from New Hampshire. I moved around a little bit. I lived in North Carolina for a little while, went back to New Hampshire. Then I moved out to LA without a reason. Everyone's like, I moved out there to be an actor or this. I moved out there because I had a friend and I was 22 and I didn't go to school yet. So I went out there and didn't really have a good time. I see a lot of people out there, with a dream and passion and really making stuff happen. I don't think LA is the place to go to find that passion. It's more once you already have it, maybe it's time to go. But lived in Washington for a little bit, and then I came out here, which is supposed to be just a temporary thing, and fell in love with it. Everywhere else I had moved, I only lived a little bit, and when I came out here, I actually moved out here. It was in early January, so not the best time to move from LA to Minnesota. I think it was -30 when I got off the plane here, and I'd gotten on the plane. It was 80 something in LA. I almost wanted to turn right back around, but by February, I remember there was this day in February that it hit like 40 degrees and everyone just went outside and was
Put shorts on.
Yeah, and I was like, these people are insane, and it's exactly where I want to be. That was over 11 years ago, so I've been here for a long time. But yeah, I did. I grew up in New Hampshire. Most of the time when I tell people that, they say that they've never met anyone else from New Hampshire. There's only a handful of us.
Well, being that you grew up in New Hampshire, the weather couldn't have been that aversive, was it?
I mean, for the most part, no. New Hampshire, I mean, maybe I'm wrong and maybe it's changed, but I feel like it would stay around 0. When it would get really cold, it would hit down to 0. So I remember that, but most of the time it balances around freezing, which makes for this really disgusting, like, slush everywhere. Like, it'll melt and then refreeze and then melt and refreeze. A lot more black ice, unfortunately, because the ice will melt and refreeze as opposed to here, it just kind of stays frozen. So I was ready for cold. I just think that year and a half sabbatical in LA did not do me help when coming here, but the cold's not going to scare me away by any means.
When I think of Manchester, New Hampshire, I also think of politics,
Mm-hmm.
because of early primary work. And do you have an affinity or an aversion to the political process or the presidential election process?
Yeah, I mean, they drill that into you very,
Really?
very early in Manchester. I remember in high school, I believe both George W. and Al Gore came to my high school, and I remember hearing from one of the teachers that it was something like every president that has ever been elected in one of the major parties or has been nominated in one of the major parties has come and talked at our school at some
Really?
point. They make the rounds, and so Manchester, for those who don't know, is the biggest city in New Hampshire. It's about 130,000 out of a little over 1 million people statewide. And we have 4 high schools in that city. So the majority of the state, large portion of the state comes straight from that city and those high schools. And they don't go and talk to us because they think we're going to impact our parents, but they know that 4 years from now when they're running re-election, we're all going to be part of that primary process, and that's going to be big for them to be able to win it. So I don't think I realized all that as a teenager. I just thought, I guess, presidents went to every high school. But yeah, we all the candidates would always come there, starting, they maybe they do something like this here, but I mean, we used to always have a separate kids voting thing in New Hampshire. So you'd go with your parents, and while they vote, you would go over and vote as well. and then they tally that all up and say who won the kids voting and who won the actual primary. It's, it's kind of one of those things when you grow up anywhere learning something, you think it's the same everywhere.
Sure.
I remember my first time going to the caucus here. I was like, this is like nothing I've ever experienced. I even in 2016 was a delegate at the first level. So I went from the caucus up to the district-wide caucusing, which was just a neat ability to see politics in action. Because as much as we're involved with the primary there, I feel it's a lot for most people. We go in and we vote and then we leave and then that's it.
Right.
So to actually be able to go in and talk about different things and I think there's a lot of issues and barriers to having a caucus, but there's also some really more in-depth concepts going on there. So it's been really neat to see such drastic ends of kind of the voting spectrum of how that works.
Right. And now we're in a time where there's more mail-in voting and just a whole consideration of the most prudent way to conduct an election. So it will be interesting.
Yeah, and New Hampshire is very, very stuck in their ways with a lot of things. That can be a good thing and a bad thing. Their state motto is "Live free or die," and they take that to heart. They're the only state that doesn't have either a sales or income tax. They don't have tax on alcohol or tobacco. You don't have to buckle up if you're over 18.
Really?
Yeah, they're the only state left without a seat buckle law. They just love their, setting their own way. So it really just fits that they're that first primary, and I don't see them wanting to try to give that up. It's up to them.
Right.
Just of that weird pride that they have in some of that stuff. I don't miss a lot of it, but it's kind of, I think a lot of that is helped raise to be who I am, that kind of thought of.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for talking.
Of course. I'm excited to, one day be back in the room with you guys and getting things going.
Well, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Hopefully sooner rather than later, yeah.
Take care.
You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.